This video is brought to you by Straight Goods News, Canada's alternative online news source. Visit straightgoods.ca.
Since they were first announced. Unfortunately, the government so far has refused to have any kind of national debate on these changes which are being opposed not just by workers but also by employers and increasingly, of course, by premiers from right across the country. And so we moved a motion in the House today calling on the government to abandon that ill-conceived plan to restrict access to employment insurance. As you all know, employment insurance is important to Canadians. It's a cornerstone of our social safety net. It's supposed to help the unemployed get by while they search for another job in their areas of skills and expertise at a comparable wage. It's a program that only employees and employers pay into, and that's important to underline. It is not a government program. And so it is wholly inappropriate that the government imposes its own ideological agenda on a program that Canadians have contributed to in good faith. And the changes are ideological. They're part of an attack on unemployed workers by taking away benefits, and they're an attempt to drive down wages. This government loves free markets, unless, of course, it's a labour market. And of course, by mismanaging the changes so badly, the government is now feeling the wrath from workers, employers, and now even premiers.
The measure is driving down wages. So what do you mean by that?
Well, as you know, under the new system, there's a progressive scheme whereby workers who have been unemployed frequently are going to have to take jobs at less and less money. So it starts at 90%, goes down to 80%, then down to 70%. What will happen at some point is that those 70% will actually be the going regional wage. And the next time somebody's employed, you start to work from a salary base of 70%. And so it's a race to the bottom. It's an attempt to drive down wages and has very little to do with what the government's rhetoric says this issue is all about, which is connecting workers with jobs, which of course is patently false because we know that there are no jobs in this country right now. There is no job creation strategy, and so the government is using this as a red herring.
What do you mean there's no jobs in this country right now?
Right now there are 6 unemployed Canadians for every 1 job opening. So of course there will be people on unemployment insurance. There is no way that this program will find a job for all Canadians. The government simply hasn't done enough on job creation to make that a reality.
So your motion today, obviously in a majority government, it may highlight the problem, but can you do anything about it in reality?
Well, you know what? This is a program. Employment insurance is paid for entirely by employees and by employers. This is not a government program. So Canadians need to have a say on these changes. What this motion here today does is highlight something that the government tried to sneak through its omnibus budget bill, through the Trojan horse bill. They're refusing to have a national debate. The motion in the House today kickstarts that national debate on changes to employment insurance, and I suspect it's not just going to be the premiers that so far have been on record opposing these changes. It'll be Canadians from coast to coast to coast who are going to let this government know just how they feel about the proposed changes.
But there's only a month left to the House, or maybe even less. What can you do in that time?
Yeah, but you'll remember that the government was banking on the fact that Canadians don't pay attention when the House isn't sitting. The last time they took Canadians for granted is when they prorogued Parliament, and yes, it was in an intersession that Canadians took to the streets and protested this government. The same thing can happen now.
So I'm not too sure it works that way. But you think that they have to listen to Canadians? They don't really have to. You think they will?
You know what? I would never suggest that this government will listen to Canadians. It certainly hasn't done that to date. But there is an opportunity for Canadians to voice their concerns. We have seen the government take those views into account. You know that they have changed their view on the refugee bill. They have changed their views on crime legislation after Canadians got outraged, got engaged in the process, and let this government know just how flawed their approach was. They have a track record now of making changes. They don't admit their mistakes, but they act on their mistakes when Canadians speak up. And we're trying to encourage the kind of national debate that creates that focus around employment insurance.
So what do you hope the Canadians will do? Come to the Hill and protest, or what?
I always welcome Canadians to come to the Hill to protest because this is their institution, and one of the things that is so frustrating about this government is that they're trying to stifle the voices of Canadians in this place. So yes, that's one avenue, but they also need to contact their individual members of Parliament. You know, the kinds of changes that Anne-Marie was talking about that have seasonal impacts, regional impacts. Conservatives too have members in those regions. Contact your MPs, let them know just what a detrimental impact these changes will have, not only on your job, on your unemployment insurance, but also on your industries and your entire regions.
Do you get the impression that some of the changes are hitting workers in areas that are predominantly held by opposition MPs?
I certainly saw that analysis done, I think, by Chantal Hébert. It wouldn't surprise me if that were the case, but the reality is all Canadian workers have paid into the system. All Canadian workers paid for this as an insurance system. There's not a dime of government money in this. This is a program that needs to protect unemployed workers from coast to coast to coast, and by undermining the system the way that the government is approaching it, it hurts workers right across the country, not just in NDP or Liberal ridings.
The government does get to make the rules.
Of course the government gets to make the rules. No, fair enough.
Employers contribute, but the government actually does get to do what it's doing, right?
Well, apparently the government also gets to seal $57 billion of the EI surplus and spend it on debt reduction. So yes, have they gotten away with it in the past? Of course they have. But at issue here is, how do you hold a government accountable for such reprehensible and wrong actions? And you can't allow a government to just do these things in a Trojan horse budget bill. It is important that we bring public attention to these issues. That is the role of the opposition, and Canadians must have the opportunity to be informed and then to voice their concerns about those issues. That is our role here. That's why we're bringing the Opposition Day motion forward.
You brought up the refugee bill where they backed out partially. They had a compromise. Your motion seems to be saying to abandon it completely. Why not suggest some sort of compromise where you actually have a shot at getting them to accept? Because it seems like telling them to scrap it completely is kind of obviously going to be rejected, right?
What we have said all along is that if you're going to bring in these kinds of changes to a program that so many Canadians rely on, then you need to talk to Canadians. You need to talk to the people who pay into the system, which is employees and employers. You need to consult with the regions. Until you've done that consultation, you should not be changing the system. And that's why our motion says, don't bring in changes now. Let's not act on those changes. We need to have that consultation first. You're putting the cart before the horse.
Why is it that you could go for it?
You know, in the last Parliament in 2009, I had the privilege of introducing another motion on EI. It was also an Opposition Day motion. That motion was passed in the House of Commons. That motion called for improved benefits, for a reduction in the waiting period, improving benefits from 55% to 60%. That motion was passed. So there is already a roadmap before this House. The government knows what it can and ought to do to improve access instead of restricting it like they're doing through the Trojan horse budget bill.